that last week, but I forgot to post that on the Slack channel.
Yeah, but
Okay.
We are now live. Wow, look at that.
Nice. What's up, Pete?
I'm going to change the cover after. Last time, the cover is so funny because Sammy, she was trying to focus, but he's like, oh God, what happened?
It's all good. It's all good. Cool. Well, good morning, you guys. Good afternoon. Wow, this is what happens when I have 2 cups of coffee.
Are going back in time?
We're being very energetic.
Yes. Well, it's like that fresh, like, also I've been up since like 8, so in my head it's still the morning, like it hasn't registered to me because I haven't taken a break really, but that's okay. So since tomorrow is our Pittsburgh Pros live stream worship service, it was a lot of words all together. I apologize.
I thought there should be cheers and applause.
Can we do like
We do this virtual applause?
Oh yeah.
There's the virtual claps. Yes.
Confetti. We need some confetti.
This one's on this side. I'm going to sit on this side.
It is mind-blowing to me that Zoom has exactly 2 reactions.
Right?
Yeah, only 2. You cannot put this, but you can only put thumb up.
I wonder if you can like add them. I don't know. That could be a whole other conversation for another time. But yeah, I wanted just to talk about just tomorrow's theme, which is love your neighbor. And I think that obviously it's a very relevant topic, and I unfortunately don't have the lesson yet. Normally I would have the lesson by midnight of Friday, but I do not.
Coming soon.
So
saying progress bar loading.
Coming soon to a live stream near you. But I did want to just talk about that idea and that theme of loving your neighbor. And the graphic that I've been using has just been Mr. Rogers because it's fun, it's relevant. Did any of you guys grow up watching Mr. Rogers?
No.
I didn't
not
watch
really.
Mr. Rogers, but I watched the movie What a Beautiful Neighborhood, and that's how I know the story about Mr. Rogers.
Oh my gosh, I still haven't seen the movie. I really want to see that movie. It's fine.
It's a really great movie, and I really like Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
My dad watched it, and he really hated it.
Really?
But I think it's because... So I wouldn't be surprised if it was my mom who wanted to see it. And I think he would have just wanted to watch like an action movie or a suspense movie or something a bit more visceral than Mr. Rogers. So
yeah, Mr. Rogers movie is very relaxing and very peaceful. If someone goes to the movie theater and they expected something very, very exciting, then Mr. Rogers would not be a good option.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I am really excited. I want to see it whenever it comes out on some platform that I can stream it on. But yeah, I didn't actually grow up able to watch Mr. Rogers. My dad grew up watching Mr. Rogers, and my brother and sister did. But I kind of want to I like what you said, Sarah, about how it's like a very peaceful and like calming sort of. One of the themes that I really like from his point of view, and it'll lead into kind of our thoughts for today, is this idea like how he would change his shoes, right? And he would take a moment just to kind of change, put on a new set of shoes and sort of like transition into the next thing. And, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I haven't really felt a moment where I can shift into this quarantine mindset. I think a lot of times I'm kind of like averting back to like my old ways in terms of like, oh, I'm gonna get dressed and get ready for work, and that is not real because I'm not going to work anymore. Or just like being able to like shift in terms of like, oh, I'm shifting into the weekend. That is not a reality for me right now. But even as disciples, thinking about shifting into this quarantine discipleship mindset, and kind of thinking about that in terms of loving your neighbor. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today. So
Sounds cool.
yeah. So first question that I have for you guys, what kind of things do you think about first offhand when you think about loving your neighbor? And I'm talking specifically about before quarantine. So before all this kind of started, if I were to ask you back in December 2019, you know, what does loving your neighbor look like? What would you guys say?
I would say it would be providing help to any person in my community, not strictly like my next door neighbor.
Nice.
Yeah, the same. I would like to say probably share the cookings or invite them to my house to attend some afternoon tea time. Yeah, probably this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would say like just the willingness to sacrifice in any way for anyone that I come across.
Yeah. Matt and Ty, you guys have thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that if there's a very clear and present need, to be answering that need. It's very, very easy to sort of see a problem or to see a situation and to avoid it. But yeah, I'd say first and foremost it'd probably be that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And so then, you know, for me, before all this, my thought was, okay, loving your neighbor as yourself. So I normally avert to thinking like, okay, if I think about a need that I have, so kind of what a little bit what you guys have shared, if I think about like, oh, I need to eat, for example. I think about, oh, let me think about other people who may need something right now, along those lines. Or if I'm at the store and like say example Walmart and I'm walking around and I look and I see this cool like Batman figurine and I'm like, oh, I don't really care for that thing, but I'm thinking about, wait, but I know someone who does love Batman. Let me buy that thing because I can afford it and give it to someone in that.
I always think of you when I saw Star Wars.
Yeah, that's me. I do like Star Wars. But see, and that's a way that you could love me in that sense of like you think about me when you see something that you know that I care about. Like I feel loved when somebody even will be like, oh, I was just walking through or oh, I was watching TV and I saw this commercial and I thought you would really like think it was funny. Or something like that. You know, thinking of others as much, if not more, when as we think about ourselves is something that I like to think about when I try to practice loving your neighbor. And so, how have you guys even felt with the change of times? You know, now we can't necessarily, Sarah, like you can't really invite people over to your house to cook food. Or, you know, I feel hesitancy of giving people things just because I'm like, I don't want anything that I have or germs or whatever, if I have anything, because I don't know, and pass it off to you through this like food or item of sorts. So in what ways have you guys seen maybe a shift because of quarantine or because of COVID-19?
I think it just makes it like really hard and really unnatural. Just because like I think we can associate like loving people with like I guess being able to touch them in some way or give them something in some way or be near them. And so at least in my mind. And so it definitely makes it yeah, just it feels like harder to do it. Which is probably not true, but it just feels like harder. I think that the social distancing makes it feel harder, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Sort of in that same vein, I'm very out of sight, out of mind type of person. That if I'm able to see someone on a frequent basis, then I'm very conscious about what it is that they need, what it is that they're looking for, how they're doing. And now I have to shift over to I'm not seeing anyone basically. And so now to have that conscious mindset of I need to keep on thinking about how to connect and maybe how I can see someone virtually, but still very, very much exist and have needs, regardless of whether or not I'm seeing them in person.
I think relatedly for me, it's just checking in on people and seeing how they're doing and like showing that, yeah, I'm thinking about you and I care about your well-being and how things are going for you, especially during this time, you know, and if there's anything you can do, whether it be praying or running, like make sure that an errand is ran for you or that you get what you need, or you just need someone to talk to or to figure something out, you know, whatever you can do from a distance. It's been a lot of shifting to that. And I think it's not particularly new, but it definitely is incredibly ramped up, and that's become the primary form of loving in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because when when you really think about it, loving your neighbor means to consider your neighbor, and to consider those around you. And it's kind of funny because being considerate right now has a lot of like meanings. Like it's considerate for me to not go to certain locations or to talk to certain people, strictly for their health, because we don't want to transfer the virus. We don't want it to spread anymore. But it also is to provide assistance or to reach out to people and things like that. And so I think it's not necessarily harder to consider your neighbor and to provide something, assistance, whatever that looks like. But I know personally, I get very caught up in, wait, what's the maximum amount of consideration I can yield for this situation? And, you know, it's kind of hard when you like try and quantify it that way. You're like, wait, I could do this. I could literally do nothing. And it's technically being considerate because I'm not going out and spreading something. Yeah. And I could do something and it could arguably be inconsiderate because I'm going out and putting myself in that situation. And that isn't to say that I'm literally like making that decision, but it's funny how it gets a little tricky depending on what you're trying to achieve. Because, you know, again, for like my neighbors, they're all relatively young people. Like, yes, there's still a risk, and yes, it's not like we're immune to anything or immune to it, but I can still, hey, I'm going out to do this task. Can I do something for you? Whereas for like my parents, like what's being considerate for them? Even my parents are like, how can we be considerate towards our children if they need help? If job situation's tricky, like there are more avenues now to help our neighbors, and it's more welcome than before. It's a lot easier for me to go to someone I've never met and be like, hey, we're both checking out. You know what? I'll buy your groceries or whatever, and things like that. So it's different avenues that we're just not used to with complete strangers oftentimes.
Yeah, I think before the quarantine time, there is not much conflict with loving yourself and loving your neighbors. It's like it's in the parallel. You can love yourself. Like I cook lots of cookies or bakeries, and I can share half to my neighbors. But currently, there's more and more conflicts with loving yourself and loving your neighbors. And the problems becomes, would you like to sacrifice yourself in order to serving the others? Like you put the others first or yourself first. For example, if your neighbors need some grocery shopping, that means we have to take the risk to go outside and get the things for them. So would we in order to show this love and in order to get the things they need, would we love to sacrifice ourselves?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I really appreciate that point too of it's like, all right, like I'm gonna go out and risk myself, even, we are all pretty young, like we're not the ones who have been deemed as the most at risk in terms of COVID-19 and et cetera. But it is still a risk because then, if you catch it, you could spread it. And you may isolate yourself, but you could also get sick yourself and then run those different risks or pass it off to somebody that you do know and care about that is maybe immunocompromised. And that's definitely a fear that I think a lot of people can have. And we did talk a little bit about fear at some point, or not today, but in previous times. But I definitely want to dive into some scriptures and, just get right into it. So I'm just going to read off this one. So where does that, idea of, love one another? So it starts off, we'll just read John 13. And actually, if somebody could read John 13, 34 through 35.
Sure, I can do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Who Swizzle.
You said 34 through 35?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another.
Awesome. Sweet. And then the second scripture that I have is Romans 12, 9 through 10. Someone would like to volunteer to read that.
I can't get that one.
Sweet.
You said 9 through 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves.
Awesome. Sweet. Yeah, so just diving right into the scriptures, we talk about love one another, we talk about love your neighbor, just because Christ has loved us. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to kind of like be in that mindset, of course, of like, all right, like, why, oh, I'm going to love people because I'm a disciple, but thinking about that deeper meaning, kind of a rhetorical question, but something I love asking is, how has God loved us?
Oh, so it's not a rhetorical question.
Well, I mean, it because we can all have like a same general gist of an answer, but I think I like seeing what the way other people word it or what specifically stands out to them when they think about the ways that God has loved us.
I think love is easy in words, but it's hard in the action, because sometimes people will say, oh, I really love you, or I want to share this with you. It's just by word, but after it attacks your own benefits, or it would ask them to sacrifice something from themselves, it's hard for them to really give that love. And then the love God gives us is send Jesus, and Jesus has to be sacrificed and then put onto the cross. God sent his own son, so that is like the greatest love, because not many people would like to sacrifice his own son and let him pass all the sacrifications.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think I would second Sarah, just with like, I think the biggest way he's shown his love is just sending Jesus. And so much so that like we're like definitely not worthy of it, but he so desires to know us and experience a relationship with us that he would be willing to like give up his son for us, which is like insane if you think about it. But yeah, I think just to kind of I guess thumbs up Sarah, or like piggyback off of her, like, yeah, definitely I would say Jesus.
Yeah. You gotta hear Matt Kerr.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing in there, which I mean, yeah, the others have already spoken about it as the biggest action that can be done. Which I mean, if we look at that, if we look at that quality, that character of self-sacrifice, of simply seeing others as more valuable than oneself, I mean, that's it. I mean, there it is. Um, because of valuing someone else, because of valuing others. Let's say, for example, it would not be good at this time to hoard medical equipment of some sort, right?
Yeah.
Like that would be bad. That is not loving someone else. That is determining, you know what, I'm only going to love myself and others by hanging on to these things, or you know what few people I deem as being important enough to give these items to, or I mean that's just sort of one thing from the current moment. Or I only love myself enough to be able to give me and the people close to me the give in their give to their emotional needs, versus there are others outside of my immediate vicinity. There are other people outside of my household that also have emotional needs that have to be given to. And so I could say, they'll be fine. They'll find someone else that will give to them, or they'll find whatever it is they need somewhere else. And then if I just don't have that willingness to ask how they're doing or what they might need, then that's not being loving and recognizing that no, they can go somewhere else. It's sort of like the apostles that said to Jesus, when there were all those people that had come out to listen to Jesus, send them away so that they can go and find food somewhere else. I mean, yeah, they may have been looking at it from a very rational perspective of, we don't have the food, we don't have the means to take care of them. But then Jesus ends up showing them, here's how we're going to take care of and feed all these people. And then bam, he does it. Yeah.
And I just want to see if I remember what the question was. The question was, how do we feel that God loves us?
Yeah.
I would definitely reiterate what has already been said. I think lately I've been really feeling loved by God by His Word, and just how thorough He was, like, and just the intention and thought that He put into telling me and all of us the things that we needed to know about Him and about ourselves, to give us purpose, to give us confidence and comfort and peace, all these things. And I just am reading a bunch of stories about His people in the Old Testament, and just how patient He was, and how He told them the same thing again and again and again. And that we still have all of these lessons. Like, I don't have to learn the hard way, and He has set me up for victory, and that He is truthful when He says that He has plans for us and plans to prosper us. So I've been really connecting with His Word as like Him telling me a story that will I'll take it, and as I grow up, and those stories that He tells me will help me to become the woman I want to be, or help give me support when I'm in situations, and I can look back on these stories. I don't know, it's just been like a nice story time that really doing feel really close and cared for as a daughter by God. And also seeing it as a love letter too, because he's so sweet, so much of the time, and just can, he's easy to connect to him emotionally reading through these scriptures that I'm reading. So yeah.
It's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, and kind of to pull all of that together, so we're thinking about John 13, love one another as I have loved you. And we can think about, that way of God telling us a story. We can think about, ultimate sacrifice, to which, in a way we are kind of we're called in our own way to be carrying our cross, right? We're called to that, in other passages, if you want to be my disciple, you must carry your cross. And so, but thinking about it in a way of being rebellious, right? Being different than the rest of society. And I think something that was mentioned earlier that I think is something I should have mentioned too, but our society is very much a self-sustaining society. If I want food, I can just get it delivered to my house. One of the giant eagles down the street, I don't know if you guys saw, or down the parkway, closed completely and is only doing delivery service.
Wow.
Wait, which one?
The one on the parkway, I think it's the South Hills giant eagle. But they completely closed their storefront just so that way they could fulfill delivery orders, which is because of the fact that so many people are just doing delivery because it's easier. You can just have it picked up right in front of your house. You never have to leave. All of the delivery people are wearing protective equipment. But I think it's really important for us to even think about, we do live in a very self-sustaining society. But and I know for me personally, I've been kind of having a hard time with specific people that I've been trying to help in my own way because they are naturally very much like, I don't want to ask for help. There was one person who their family members texted me, hey, can you please go do this for my sibling? And I was like, wait, but I asked them if they needed anything just a few days ago and they told me no. So it was like that. And I don't know if that was just a relationship thing, but I've seen that coming up more and more where it's like people aren't asking for help. Or we have so many utilities and avenues for us to kind of love ourselves and just to kind of take care of ourselves in our own unique way. But I think it's important even as disciples that we kind of think about what's something that I can do to go that extra mile, to kind of, because when I think about it, God didn't necessarily have to send his son, right? He could have just been like, yeah, whatever, you guys can keep slaughtering or sacrificing lambs and chickens and whatever have you in order for you to be saved, and you're going to have to work that extra mile. You have to work that extra mile. But instead God decided, no, I'm going to go that extra mile, and I'm going to go be that difference. And because if we truly are loving our neighbor in the way that God calls us to, it says at the end of John 13, it says all men will know that you are my disciples. Right. And it's not just us loving strangers too, it's one another. So thinking about my roommates, for example, what ways can I go that extra mile for my roommates? What ways can I go that extra mile for my family? What ways can I go the extra mile for that stranger that is standing? Like Elizabeth was telling me a story about a woman who's standing outside Giant Eagle asking for people to pick her up some things because she had anxiety and couldn't go inside. But it's going that like next step, I think is what really makes the difference when we talk about loving one another. And that leads into that Romans 12 scripture, love must be sincere. Are we sincerely loving people to that depth, the way that God loves us to that depth? So what kind of thoughts or feelings or ways of thinking about like going that extra mile? Is that like, oh, that's challenging to think about, or oh, that makes sense, and what ways can we do that? So opening up the floor here.
I think the challenging aspect of it isn't really like the doing of it. It's initially just the consideration of it. It's so easy, like with that woman example, I can walk straight into John Eagle and never interact with that person and never think anything of it. I can think of so many opportunities that I let by because I don't just initiate in some way to really find the need. And that's kind of where the challenge is for me is, oh, I'm more than happy to help people. I just know about and walk through a day and not even realize that people were asking for help or were in need around me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think I think the challenge I can be challenged by the need to sort of get out of myself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I can definitely be like more passive in a lot of different areas of my life. And that I think loving people can be one of them, which doesn't sound good. um, but yeah, I think I'm more of a responder than a person who maybe goes after, if that makes sense. And um, I don't think that's what Jesus modeled when it comes to love, because he was definitely like he was going places, right? And so I think just like looking for people to love, opportunities to love, especially now, especially now with like the way things are, because it's just easy to like quarantine and leave it at that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the looking aspect, like searching. I think that goes back into the scripture where it says, "Let love be sincere," because it's impossible for it not to be sincere if I'm putting myself in those situations, you know.
Definitely.
So yeah,
Definitely makes sense. Cool. Yeah, and
One of
I
the
oh, go ahead.
one of the things that comes to mind is being able to give selflessly and to give in the way that God gives is sort of the question of where does it end? As in, if I begin giving to the utmost limits of what I can give, at at what point does that end? um, it's like, okay, gonna go out and do some serving for a couple of hours, and then get to come back home and get to relax and have some food myself, and go and do this and that I enjoy that are for me. Okay, yeah, that's sort of the standard that we're all used to in different ways. Okay, I'm gonna go and hand out food at this at a at oh, what am I thinking of? Not a food drive, but at the produce to people events, for example, or gonna go and serve the church or serve the ministry in this way, or maybe we're gonna go and serve the poor in this facet, um, and then that's it. I come home, and then that's it for the day. But what if that just went on for the whole day, every day, one after another, after another, after another? I mean, what is the calling, or what is the standard, or how far exactly does it go? How far do I need to go? Um, yeah, I think that may be something that comes up a lot. Someone that likes to exaggerate arguments or anything like that would say, "Oh well, if you're going to say that we need to go and serve, why don't we just go and serve all the time, nonstop?" And of course, it doesn't necessarily work that way, but we do also have to ask, okay, how much farther can I go? How much farther should I go? And I think, of course, it's wherever there's a need, go there. If we're aware that there is something that needs to be done, go and be that need. Um, wherever it is, our being able to help is God's direct intervention for that situation. Whatever problem it is that we're able to assist on, then us being there, that need being on our hearts to go and fulfill, that is going to be God answering a prayer.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I love to elaborate just a little bit, even that question of how far do I need to go? Obviously Jesus went to the point of death. And that's something that actually is going to be part of tomorrow's service during the communion. But I even think about Galatians 6. It's the first part, we're talking about doing good to all. And Paul says in verse 2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. And so in a way of like carrying burdens, loving people, taking on those needs. And I think a lot of times we can take that and kind of put on like a codependent nature to it. I know that's something I'm naturally inclined to do, of like, oh, I'm going to love people and take on everything. And I don't know about you guys, but I have learned over the years that is not self-sustaining. You cannot wake up every day and just devote everything you have to other people, because there comes a point where you are wiped, physically, spiritually, mentally. And even Jesus didn't do that. Jesus went and he took times to go pray, to get recharged. He slept on boats, as we talked about last time. He went and took naps. Like, we need to take naps too. If you give all your money, eventually you get to a point where now you need money, and you need other people to help you. And that's definitely been one of those things that I've been thinking about a lot lately, just in terms of loving one another. Is like, okay, financially, how much can I give? Especially now that I'm going on to unemployment, all that, like all those thoughts kind of jumping in my head. Or, with the recent, what's it called? What's the word of the government money that just came in?
Stimulus check.
Yeah, stimulus check. It's like, oh, great. What can I do with this now? It's like, oh, wait a second. But then later on, it says in Galatians 6 verse 9, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. And my mother is calling me. Okay, bye mother. Sorry, love you, Mom. But, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong in the family of believers. And it is opportunities. And I appreciate what you said, Josue, about finding those opportunities, because it's not like we don't have a heart that's willing to give sometimes. It's just finding those opportunities, or going after more opportunities to give, and to love, and to devote to one another. And part of that is just telling people that we need something, and part of that is encouraging each other. Part of that is like not necessarily thinking of ideas of like, oh, let me just do this thing, because for some people they don't need groceries because they do the delivery, or because they're willing to go themselves to go to the store. But just thinking of other people and maybe ways that we can serve through different avenues. And we've only really touched on a couple of them. But yeah, I definitely think it's good to kind of remember that there are people who are in need, and whether or not we think about that need, because it could be anything from physical, spiritual, mental, emotional. Most of the time it's physical, but like putting that in mind.
I think of Matthew 25 in verses 31 to, I don't know, probably the end of the chapter. I'm not gonna read it because it's long, but the concept is there. And it's funny because I thought of it when everyone, especially Matt, what you were saying, like, well, when is enough? Like, how far do I have to go and all of this? And I think I think sometimes that's a question we ask ourselves when we have already kind of maybe taken ourselves out of the situation already. Like, oh, I don't want to go super far, so maybe I won't go at all, kind of thing. I don't know. It's interesting, but that passage there, it discusses like specifically in verse 34, it reads, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came in to visit me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?' The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" And it's that idea that, like, yeah, we're called to give a lot, but it always starts with just giving somewhere. There's always this small start, and these people were rewarded just for giving in passing. Even like, that isn't to say that that's all you need to ever do, but sometimes it's important to just stay in the moment and think, you know what, I'm not going to be concerned about how much money do I have to give all these people always. I know I see someone right in front of me who needs $20. Okay, I can do that. I'm not going to get hung up with a snowball here, or where this is going to lead me, or, you know, how much this is going to cost me at the end of the quarantine. I see a need and I can give it now. And that's all where my mind should really be at. And I think when we really just stick in the moment and ask ourselves, how can I provide specifically here? It's a lot less likely that we're going to get stuck with this like defeated mindset of, well, how much is this really going to ask of me in the future?
Yeah, definitely. Good question. But I do also really appreciate that scripture. So, it's a good one. Yay. Sarah, thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Cool. Well, I just want to finish it off. What have been some things that maybe has been on your heart that you've been wanting to do in terms of loving your neighbor, or maybe some things that you have done or that you've seen other people do that you just want to share and be like, yo, this is cool, and we could all do something, or we can all encourage one another with that idea?
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, I was like researching like ways to volunteer, specifically like for COVID or whatever. And I found this link, and I should have saved it. I lost it, but I found this link where you could like basically like sign up to go and like pick up groceries for like older people or whatever, and then just drop it off to them.
I think
Like
I
within the
share
community or whatever.
I share lots of virtual voluntary link in our channels sometime.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Is it like was it something like that?
Yeah, I think they have different categories. Some of the virtual volunteer is a volunteer for the blind people, and some of them is for consultant, like you can help them spiritually, and some of them is help them physically to provide financial help, or going out for grocery shopping, or go to the pharmacy.
Okay, I have to check that out.
Yeah, there are a lot of link in one.
Okay, yeah, but there was something that I got super excited about, but then I lost the link, and yeah.
Rebound. Purposeful. Very cool. Yeah, volunteering, that's definitely something great. And I know for me, it was hard to volunteer while I was working because I was deemed essential business. But now that I've been laid off, I'm like, oh, I have time now. Cool. So, yeah, any other thoughts or ideas?
I'm always a big fan of doing something for other people and not being around to take the credit. So like the idea of just like, I don't know, making like a gift bag or something like that for my neighbors and just dropping them off at their front door and just leaving it there. Like it's not important who it came from. I just wanted to provide something, a service, or like maybe you need some supplies, or here's just a general. I'm sure everyone needs this in these this dire hour kind of thing. Just little things like that, just to like, hey, I just want to provide a little bit, something that you may or may not need, and do something like that. So trying to figure out what that really looks like, but it's things like that are always fun. I don't know.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would agree. I would like to do some volunteer work to get the things for the neighbor, or we could pray for them to see what they need and put their requests into our praying.
Yeah, definitely. Prayer obviously does magic, miracles, magic.
It's only a
Yeah.
scene. No big deal.
Yeah, it's but yeah, no, that's definitely very true. Yeah, I know for me, one of the things that I've been really thinking about is just being a light to every person that I interact with, which specifically is like my roommates. Whether it's cooking for them, making baked goods, like last night, they were all kind of craving chocolate, and I felt that presence. So I was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make brownies because I know this is gonna encourage them. So I made chocolate peanut butter swirl brownies. But it was like one of those things where I'm like, all right, I see this and I'm gonna go that extra mile. Or one of my roommates really has a hard time with cooking in particular. Like she's hungry, but she doesn't want to cook. So then it's like, okay, I'm gonna go cook for you. But then even thinking about, okay, who's someone I can call today? Who's somebody that I can call and encourage today? Because that is something that I like doing. I like just going on a walk and calling somebody, or I'll clean my bathroom or something. And like, yeah, sure, I can clean my bathroom and listen to a podcast, or I can do that and, be on the phone with someone and really have that like deep connection. Because I am fortunate enough that I have social connections, but I also like know people who are by themselves. And for a lot of it is my family members, but they are really going through a hard time right now. And so it's like, okay, like how can I build you up today? Like my sister, for example, she's like, I hate working by myself. I hate this so much. She's like, can you just like be on FaceTime just there and present? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So, but like going those extra steps of just using technology, and of course, doing all the live streams is its own little service of itself. But yeah. Awesome. Well, that's what I have for today. Yeah, what do you guys think? Feeling? All thoughts? Claps?
Yes.
Claps.
Claps. Maybe two reactions at once.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that you had us talking about that, Sammy, because I think it's just
press two.
It's not natural for me to think of I don't know, be creative, and thinking about things that you can do. If I see the need, then like, yeah, I'll go for it. But like thinking of ways to do it without being prompted, this is like a prompting to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's always good to kind of be reminded of little things. So as we go along. Awesome. Well, okay. There we go. Well, that's what I got for y'all today. So thanks for joining in and tuning in on the YouTubes. We'll be live again tomorrow, 11 a.m. Sam Fowler preaching the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Also also please have grace on me as these blood vessels have popped, all of them.
From typing?
No, from playing guitar. That
Oh,
I learned how to play as a kid, and then it's just been so long working and everything. It's like,
oh gosh.
but it's great. Sarah, amazing talent on the piano.
I have no idea how to play that part. And first a couple of days, I was so awkward in trying to catch the rhythm. And then Donnell said to me, can you play more comfortably? I was like, playing this is not comfortable at all.
Well, it's gonna be
I have a moment of hesitation for practicing because I'm afraid that it's not loving my neighbors. Because my neighbors are going to complain at me. I have to practice from morning to night.
Yep. That it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Encouraging.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool. Thanks for watching,
Thanks for
YouTuber.
watching.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, YouTube.